Hi, this is Stan Bush.
Hi, this is Stephanie Calvert.
This is John Payne.
This is Jack Hughes.
Hey everyone, this is Britt Lightning from Vixen.
Hi, I'm Carrie Stevens.
Hello, I'm Kofi Baker.
And you're listening to Play That Rock and Roll.
Okay, we are here with Jesse Jackson, the host of Set Lusting Bruce. Jesse, I was a guest on your show just about a year ago, and I had a wonderful time. We talked about a lot of Bruce Springsteen topics. You are joining me here today to talk about this album, Born in the USA, which just celebrated its 40th anniversary. Thank you so much for coming by the show. It's good to see you again.
It is good to see you. Yeah, that little obscure album that, only the hardcore fans hear. It's always kind of cool that we're doing, when you hit that anniversary. And so, yeah, I'm excited to talk about an amazing album, an amazing track, and always love talking to you, my friend Joseph.
Oh, awesome. Yes. Yeah, this deep cut. This is right down there with Ghost of Tom Joad and
right.
all the other
Exactly.
kind of lost Springsteen records.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're kidding around a little bit here. So you've been doing Set Lusting Bruce for how long now?
Since 2015.
Wow.
And I've hit over 1,200 episodes.
Those are like Joe Rogan numbers.
Yeah. It is still going strong. I still love talking. A little bit of the show has expanded over the years where I talk to a lot more fans of other artists. And I will have writers and people on the podcast, mostly about music. Though I did love, I have one coming out in a couple weeks where my guest had just written his grandfather's story, who was a Holocaust survivor and ended up serving in 4 armies during World War II.
Oh my gosh.
And he, at the very beginning, said, I'm not sure how you're going to combine Springsteen music and the Holocaust, but I'm looking forward to us trying. And we did not do it direct tie, but we did have a good conversation. And at the end, he says, I think we actually did kind of weave it together. So there you go.
Wow, that's fascinating. Very cool. I'll definitely check that one out. Yeah, I wanted to have you on specifically because what I like about Set Lusting Bruce is that it is a completely fan-centric podcast. So all these episodes you've done over the years is about talking about fandom and a fan's understanding of Bruce's music. And so I hope that, when we talk about this record, maybe you can pull some memories from your conversations about this album in particular. But I have to wonder right off the bat, given that you talk to so many diehard fans, and we know how diehard fans are. Diehard fans usually like more obscure, aspects of artist catalogs. And Born in the USA, despite our jokes earlier, is this overarching massive project that had a lot of pop sensibilities. Do you find yourself talking with other Springsteen fans about this album really much at all compared to Bruce's other records?
No, not at all, Joe. We don't talk much about it. The casual fan, certainly when they join me, know the songs from that. People will talk about their favorite Bruce Springsteen songs, and if they're not a hardcore fan, certainly songs from this album. However, it is often brought up as the gateway album. It is the album that got you into Bruce. Sometimes that's The River, sometimes it's Born to Run, sometimes it's Greetings. And then people otherwise that were later to Bruce, The Rising even.
Yeah.
But yeah, a good percentage of people that it is the gateway album because they heard Dancing in the Dark on the radio or saw Courtney Cox dancing, which, by the way, as we're recording this, she recently did an Instagram. I don't know if you saw it.
I did.
Yeah, very funny.
Yeah.
When that they just, I've got to know more about this guy, and has led them down to this, now 40, 50-year conversation he's had with his fans.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of what I expected. And that's interesting to hear because I wonder what your perspective. So
Yeah.
you remember when this record came out? I'm sure this is a question you probably get more than most, but like, you host the Bruce Springsteen podcast. How did your fandom of Springsteen originate, and where does this record fall into it?
Yeah, so the first time I heard Bruce was probably in 1980, because I started dating my wife at the time, certainly not married, but Linda and I met in February of 1980. And like in May or June, a friend of hers was going to school on the East Coast, came and visited Lake Charles, and we went to dinner with her, and she kept talking about this artist guy named Bruce Springsteen that I'd never heard of.
Mm.
So, Hungry Heart came on the radio. I bought The River, remember really loving The River. And then certainly, like everyone else in America, bought Born in the USA, probably on cassette.
Oh,
I think by that time we had moved off 8 tracks. Though I did have Born to Run on an 8 track. And I loved the album, and then bought Tono of Love, and then kind of bought the box set of the live shows, and then kind of drifted away. Just other things came on, and then two or three things happened. One, after 9/11, he performed with some of the members of the band, did My City of Ruins at a fundraiser for 9/11.
that was the
And
concert for New York.
yeah, and
Yeah,
it was just captivating.
Yeah.
And then I bought I bought the Rising CD, but I hadn't listened to it much. And then in 2002, I went to my first Bruce show.
Oh, nice.
And
Okay.
then between those three, I became, passionate or / obsessed. But I still routinely pull out Born in the USA and listen to it in full. I do not have disdain for it, and probably No Surrender would be on my top 10 songs on my list. Yeah. So, and in Glory Days and Dancing in the Dark would be top 20 for sure for me. I always tell people who don't like the album, a few years ago, a bunch of Americana artists, including Jason Isbell and Holly Williams, did a album called Dead Man's Town. And it is them, a tribute to Bruce Springsteen, all Americana artists doing the whole album. And like
The
No
Born in the
Surrender,
USA album.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
awesome.
like Jason Isbell and Amanda Shires do Born in the USA. I'm on Fire by Low. Holly Williams does No Surrender. Glory Days by Justin Townes Earl. So My Hometown by the North of Mississippi All Stars. It really is and it kind of gets you to rethink the songs in a different way. So.
Wow, very cool. I was not aware of that project. I'm definitely curious to hear that. Interesting, and I'm happy to hear that you like this record, because I know that like the synth production and the bombast of the 80s, sound was a turnoff for a lot of like, old school, diehard, original Bruce fans. Also interesting to hear that you like some of the poppier aspects of the album, Glory Days, Dance in the Dark. I like those songs, of course, too. Um, the main thing I wanted to talk to you about today, though, of course, is the title track. And I wonder, if you can remember, go back in time to when you first got this record. I first heard this song as a kid, and the big production and that just bellowing chorus. As a kid who didn't know anything about lyrics, I loved that. All I understood was "Born in the USA," and I, as a child, kind of fell for what, frankly, a lot of adults and even a president fell for, where I just thought this was some sort of, yeah, America's great type of song, like "You Can Still Rock in America" by Night Ranger, or "Real American" by or Rick Derringer. So when you got this record and you first heard that song, did you identify what it was about right away, or were you listening a little more casually and not paying too much attention at that time?
Yeah, I was definitely casual. I was not paying attention to that. And in fact, every once in a while you'll see something on social media. I was this day old when I found out blank, right?
Yes.
Um, I cannot remember, but I know there was a point where it hit me, got in a little small town jam, which and I think this may have been either right near, but my son was very interested in my father. My father was a veteran. And so he called him Gramps, and he asked Gramps, why did you join the army? And he said, because the judge said you can go to the army or you can go to jail.
Oh,
And
yeah,
so I went to the army. And, my son was like, what?
yeah.
Grandpa, what the hell? And so it, and so that hit me. And I mean, so since I had a kid, so, I mean, that might have been, and because I knew kind of emotionally that after it became, you had people talking about it, that it was not this great anthem. And there's a lot of debate, I think, of why Bruce chose to do this song with this anthem. The and I'm bad at words sometimes, but that dichotomy, right, of
Yeah,
very bleak lyrics and this uplifting anthem. And I think that's by choice,
yeah.
and I think so. And the other question I ask, and I'd love your uh, opinion, Joe, is I often wonder if he had not done the rock and roll version of Born in USA and had done that blues version, would the album has hit the same way?
Oh, certainly not. I don't.
Yeah,
I don't think so at all. I
yeah,
think. I think this record represents basically a coming out party. For Bruce. I
yeah,
think he was. I guess. He's part of that class of 83, 84 with Michael Jackson and Prince and Madonna, where you went from rock star to superstar
yeah,
to, like, I mean, which is really personified in that oh gosh, the "We Are the World" music video with him and Michael kind of singing back and forth. He's kind of
yeah,
representing the rock and roll world. And this album has as many singles as Thriller does. Like, I just don't think that you would have had that sort of pop success unless you went full in on 80s pop production like this record does.
yeah. And we've often talked about, me and my buddy Sam, would his career been like Neil Young? Was
Oh,
certainly a successful career,
yeah.
but not the, as you said, superstar, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting to think.
I think
So
that's a
yeah,
great comparison because, the funny thing is like Neil has a kind of similar song to this one, in '89 with Rockin' in the Free World,
yes,
which I mean, that one's a little harder to misinterpret. I mean,
Right.
if you pay attention to lyrics on that one at all, you realize right away, like, oh, this is a really sarcastic, angry song. But that chorus, that "Rockin' in the Free World" chorus, very much feels like the "Born in the USA" chorus, as they both feel like, yeah, we're having a great time in America. But yeah, "Rockin' in the Free World" a lot harsher. But I think Bruce probably would have had that Neil Young arc.
Yeah.
Might not have made trans.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Okay, so you understand you understand what this record is about now. You understand what this song specifically is about now. When you reflect on it, as you've thought about it over the years, just plain and simple, what do you think of the song now?
So it is a song. It's interesting. It is one of the songs that has been overplayed in my mind
Oh
as a
yeah,
fan, just as a fan,
right.
right? You know, a couple of times at a live show, I've gotten that, and and I'll tell a funny story about hearing Born in USA live
I'll
later.
put a pin in that one. I was going to ask
Yeah,
you about
okay,
that.
yeah. But um, it is it it is it is certainly always powerful when he and the E Street Band do it. I will give you a I got lucky enough to go see Springsteen on Broadway the
Oh,
first time he
cool.
was on, okay?
Okay.
And I, of course, looked at the set list before I was going.
A true fan.
Yes, and I said, well, I don't like the blues version of Born in the USA. So I won't enjoy that. And if anyone has not seen it, it's available on Netflix. They filmed the version, and he is talking about going to get draft board and how he didn't get picked. And his father had always said, "Wait till the army gets you. Wait till the army gets you. Boy, once that army gets you, you're going to get that." And when he came home and told him that, he didn't get drafted, and no, not because it was because he had had a motorcycle accident, so he didn't pass the physical. There's rumors often that he definitely tried to dodge the draft, though
Mhm.
like most young men, he did not want to go to war. And his father says, "That's good. That's good." And Bruce says, "But I often think who went in my place," and then goes to the acoustic version of Born in the USA.
Oh.
And I go, "Well, shut the F up, Jesse. What do you know, right? Don't second guess the boss." It's
Wow.
a powerful moment. It is an incredibly powerful moment.
Do you remember? So you remember that very vividly from when you were there, right?
Yeah,
Wow, that's fascinating. Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, um, part of um, part of what inspired me to want to talk about this record is that earlier this year I read Ron Kovic's, here if I can show this here,
Yeah.
Born on the 4th of July. I know a lot of people read this in high school. I didn't read it in high school, but I saw the movie recently, a couple of years ago, so I wanted to read the book, and I know I'm late to the game on it, but that book hit me like a ton of bricks. I was absolutely not prepared for how emotionally gut wrenching that is. So it makes sense to me why Bruce would be so impacted by it as well, and be inspired to write music. Have you read that book?
I have not, and it sounds like I should. I just have never taken the time to read the book, and it sounds like it holds up.
Yeah, it's not a particularly long read, but it is one that you might want to break it up with something cheery, kind of in
Okay.
between, because it is very dark and very painful, and it just makes you feel for the guy. And Ron Kovic, this guy actually just put out another new book like earlier this year, which is kind of a continuation of this. So I read
Okay.
both of those, and yeah, man, I'm glad I read them because I think they're very important, and I think it's like the work of someone who's truly, by the real definition of patriotism, someone who's a patriot. But my God, they go to some dark places. So highly recommended, but be ready.
Okay. Sounds good. Good.
Yeah. So, okay, so kind of on the note about Vietnam veterans, I guess this is, the thrust of the song is that, so many guys, went to Vietnam and survived, but came back to a country that did not welcome them back in the same way that the WW2 veterans got welcomed back. And there was a lot of people who didn't really understand why we were even in Vietnam in the first place. And there was like, there was a lot of weirdo conspiracy theories about vets being held in Vietnam after the war ended. And it's a really interesting time. I mean, this kind of stuff shows up in the movies of like the 80s, when Bruce puts this out, Stallone is making, that Rambo movie where he goes back to Vietnam to win the war. And, if you look on the Wikipedia page, you'll find like articles that are comparing these guys, but they're doing very different things with this whole Vietnam veteran topic. So I wonder, what do you remember about this era? I mean, just in your social circle or in your world, I mean, what do you remember? What were Vietnam veterans or was the war a touchy subject? Was it tough for people? Did people just kind of look the other way? Did people have maybe, were they uncomfortable even bringing up the topic at all? Like, what do you remember about the mood, in
Yeah.
the early 80s?
So I remember, so my dad, when I was in the third grade, went to Vietnam,
Oh,
and actually served for a year. And I asked him about, his experience when this started coming out.
yeah.
And he explained that in a lot of ways he was lucky. And I pieced together because he did not like to talk about his
Oh, yeah.
service at all. And in fact, when he died, um, 10, 15 years ago, he refused to have a military funeral. He allowed us to have a flag and someone to play taps, but that was it. And that was because my mom pushed. She
Okay.
said, "You've got to do that."
Yeah.
So he was an instructor on a lot of different things that young men went to Vietnam. They had to know map reading, military shooting, you know, weaponry and everything. And there was a group of them that were instructors, and the base commander kept pushing them where they would not go overseas. And his argument was they're better serving teaching these young men how to survive overseas than it is them actually going themselves. They're better as teachers. But finally, they had to go. And so there were 5 or 6 of them that all went at one time, and they all kind of stayed together and came home at the same time. So he said, since we traveled in a group, I was never spat on. I was never, treated
Oh,
poorly.
yeah.
Um, but it is, and I do remember it now. Then, if you, it's very, I don't want. I want to be careful how I say my words here.
Yep.
It is now a reflex that if you hear someone is a veteran on TV, thank you for your service.
Oh, of course.
I mean, the same way if you sneeze, bless you, it is just thank you for your service. And I'm not saying people aren't sincere on that, but it was, I feel like the Gulf War, that first Gulf War, all of a sudden people realized, hey, wait a minute, the politicians are the one, no one, 1%, but like really, generally, no one wants to go overseas and try, to get shot at and to shoot other people. And so maybe we should put our anger toward the politicians who are doing this instead of the veterans. But yeah, I remember, and my mom has said multiple times that my dad was a different person after he came back from Vietnam. Just he was not the same. And so I kind of a little bit know the thought of how that changes someone.
Yeah.
And as he said, he had a pretty good support system and was, he stayed in the military, made it his career, and then, after retired, repaired washing machines and dryers and lawnmowers for Sears.
Oh,
So,
sure.
you
Yeah.
know, um, but yeah, I do remember that um, they were, and growing up, I was born in 59, so, you know, 69, 72, 73, every book I read, a young adult novel, though we didn't call them that back then, there
Right.
was going to be a character that was going to get drafted, and you knew they were going to be dead by the end of the book because they were going to Vietnam.
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
Oh, wow.
you knew that was going to be a character that was going to happen.
Wow, that's fascinating. I did not know that about your dad. Really appreciate you sharing that. That's very interesting. I don't have anyone in my family who was in Vietnam, but my grandfather was in World War II,
Right.
and same kind of experience. He did not really talk about it. I had one conversation with him when I was in grade school once, and I remember my mom saying to me, this is important. He doesn't talk about this stuff, because it's a very hard topic, when you've served. And yeah, and I think you're right, is like the thank you for your service, the appreciation for veterans. I mean, if you go to any sports game, the celebration and honor of veterans today, it's, for younger people, I guess, who didn't live through it, there was none of that in the 80s.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was not I mean, there was always Veterans Day,
Yeah.
but there was not first off, you did not have websites selling things, but even
Oh,
though you would not see military themed, you know, cowboy jerseys
oh, sure.
or,
Yeah.
Boston Red Sox jerseys or, um, New York Rangers. I mean, there wasn't, and there is now. I mean,
Yeah.
every November, you can buy military themed. Same way that in October you can buy pink, for breast awareness, cancer awareness, and so I think it's a better world. I'm happy for that. I just do wonder that sometimes, and I think that's why Born in the USA remains relevant today. It is a song talking about this, and not to get too political, Joe, but
Yeah.
you hear stories about veterans hospitals, the poor conditions,
Yeah.
the poor funding that we don't we are very quick to send our young men and young women to battle, and yet we are not as kind at protecting them and supporting them afterwards financially.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what comes to mind very clearly in my memory from the Iraq War era was the Walter Reed stories. I
Yeah,
would say in 2006, 2007. And it was just like, what's old is new again. Lessons, we as, civilians are more aware of this stuff, but how is it that our leaders who made these decisions, are still doing the same garbage, that they did, 20 years or 30 years before or whatever. That's very disheartening. And I think you're right that, I think this song does a good job of like, we have a right to be outraged, by that sort of thing, and it does a good job of reminding us to like direct that outrage at the politicians that have, let our servicemen and women down, uh, as opposed to I guess I've read stuff. There was just a lot of confusion back in the late 70s and early 80s, so I know that there was some sort of backlash to the people in the service coming home, which I think is too bad.
Yeah, and one other thing, and then we can move on,
Oh yeah,
right?
go on. No, please.
I just was pulling this up. So it during Civil War, you were called a soldier's heart, and then in World War I, it was shell shock, and then World War II, it was battle fatigue, combat stress reaction,
Yep.
and now that it's PTSD.
Yeah.
Right. And so they keep changing it. And I just read a really interesting article that says, you shell shock is very visceral.
Yeah.
It is, and so PTSD is a little bit kinder and less of a label. And they said maybe is that, certainly not to give shame to anyone who's suffering it, but if you call it a less gentle name, does it make it people feel as much like it isn't as big a deal as it actually is? Just a
I
thought.
I think that's a great point. And yeah, PTSD a little more, I guess, sort of like along the lines of being like politically correct. But I've got
Yeah,
another one for you.
yeah,
There's a here's a political buzzword, triggered.
yeah,
When I was younger, when I first heard the term triggered, what I understood that to be was fireworks going off and veterans who have auditory triggers, you could have flashbacks or be really, bothered by it. And, we should be more sensitive to stuff like that. That's not a big ask, just
right.
to keep that in mind. And so to me, when I first heard the word triggered, that wasn't like a joke word. That was a very
No,
serious concept. And now that word has been so politicized to mean so many other different things and in a really disrespectful way. That it bums me out because it's just like, who gets lost in all that is veterans where that word actually meant something to them. And now
yes,
now it's a big joke. And
absolutely.
another thing I talked about on a different pod was that I guess the difference, something I remember from my youth was seeing like hack comedy movies where the portrayal of Vietnam veterans was so disrespectful and it was wheelchair bound, heavily armed, a toaster pops and they're under the counter, like really shitty stuff. And that's another thing where like you would never see that in a movie today. But I'm not talking about like ancient, 60s movies. I can think of movies from the early 2000s where that kind of shit is. And I
Yeah.
just wonder if like, this respect for veterans that we have today, it really is a new phenomenon. There was a long stretch in between World War II and today where I don't think that was really the case.
Yeah, and I think that was what was sad is that, World War II veterans were the greatest generation, right?
Yeah.
There's talk about we just celebrated anniversary of D-Day, and there were, a veteran was 102 at the celebration and passed away while he was in France, which
Oh,
was just, yeah. But it 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 became Korea, not so much, and then Vietnam. Um, and then when you think about Afghanistan, which was kind of, was forever going on,
right.
it's a tough time. And yeah, so I think that's why the song remains.
Yeah.
Um, so, and he plays it more often overseas than he does in the US, which is a little bit odd. I have gotten to see it a couple of times. I'll double check on the My Boss Time, the website for all Springsteen fanatics. It is Elko from Sweden actually does a database that he shows every concert Bruce has ever performed you sign up, pick it, and then they will tell you how often you've seen songs.
Oh,
And
okay, that's
yeah,
terrific.
yeah,
How,
like
wait, just do you
yeah.
know offhand how many Springsteen concerts you've attended?
Um, I have gone to 20.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So I have seen Born in the USA 4 times out of the 20.
That's okay. That's
Yeah.
pretty good odds.
Yeah.
I've seen him 4 times, and you know what I'm remembering, kind of talking about this when I was on your show. Of the 4 times I saw him, he never played it, and
Yeah.
I was hoping to hear it.
So that's a great segue to one of my favorite stories. So we're in Houston for the High Hopes tour, and it's an outdoor arena. It's the Cynthia Woods Mitchell Pavilion, June 5th, no, May 6th, 2014. And right at 3 hours, really good show. And we're afterwards in the kind of open air, where the concessions are and all the bathrooms are. And I'm waiting for my wife to get out of the restroom, and this very drunk lady says, "Is it over?" I go, "Yeah, it's over." Like, it's over? I said, "Yeah, he did almost 3 hours. Yeah, the show's over." But he didn't do Born in the USA. I said, "No, he doesn't often do Born in the USA, just sometimes. But it's his biggest hit." I said, "Yeah, I know, but he just doesn't." So since then, every time I've seen Born in the USA, I pull out my phone, pull up Twitter, and I go, "Born in the USA, somewhere there's a very drunk lady in Houston happy."
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Well, hey man, I feel her pain. One of those times would have been nice. I mean, I wonder, do you think it's because there was the misunderstanding of the lyrics at first, and also B, the not, I mean, not significant, but not nothing either, backlash to the song when more conservative leaning people, particularly Reagan's people, found out what it was about, and how he didn't want Reagan using the song. Do you think he just thinks it's like too much for the States and he just plays it overseas, or what do you think about that?
I don't know.
Yeah.
That I think it's an interesting thought. Um, and I wonder if it's because he doesn't want to do necessarily a greatest hits tour.
Of course, yeah.
So he almost always does Dancing in the Dark. This latest tour he's done No Surrender often.
Mm.
This also he's done Glory Days fairly more on this latest tour. So maybe it's just he's trying to spread the wealth.
Hmm.
But and maybe he feels like, I don't know, maybe he feels like in Europe, because that was his gateway album, that he had to do that, right?
Mm.
So I don't know. Yeah.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a great topic. It's a great song, and it's a great record. So this has been a lot of fun chatting with you about it.
Yeah.
I hope it comes up more on your podcast, because I wish it got just a little bit more respect from the diehard fans. I don't think there's anything wrong with I mean, it's my like, I consider myself a diehard Springsteen fan, and it's my favorite record by his.
Yeah.
Born to Run is like right there, but I mean,
Sure.
I put it in my number one spot.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really appreciate you coming by to talk to me about it, and I'm happy to hear your experiences and thoughts on it. What has been going on with the podcast lately, and can you tell us a little bit about what you got coming up?
I absolutely can. I have, as I said, I've been kind of diversifying, but I've had some really fun Springsteen guests on. One of my other podcasts is Perfectly Good Podcast, John Hyatt from Alphabetical Order. And so we are coming up in June. We will record, it'll be out in July, Have a Little Faith, which
Okay.
is what many people would consider his most well-known song. So that's coming up. I just had Jamie Rogers, who's a big fan of the podcast and of John Hyatt, join me on Set Listing Bruce. That'll be coming out the middle of June. We talked Tom T. Hall, and that was a fun conversation because he is a huge Tom T. Hall fan. Tom H., Beastie Boss, and that will be coming up at the end of June. Tom takes Springsteen songs and puts Beastie Boy lyrics to them.
Okay, sold. I'm in.
Right?
Yeah.
And coming up, I have a father-daughter who wrote a book together about traveling to see concerts. And they're going to join me for a special Father's Day episode. So that's what we got coming up.
Well, that sounds very wholesome. I will be tuning in for all that. That sounds awesome. Do you recall when we last spoke, my suggestion of who you should have on the show?
No, remind me.
Yeah, it's I think I need to help you track this person down, even, I mean, if they're even still alive, but I don't have it in front of me, unfortunately. But it was that newspaper article I had from the late 70s where like a 7-year-old kid interviewed Springsteen for a local paper here in Wisconsin. And it was only 3 questions, but I'm sure that guy is out there somewhere, and I think he'd be like the perfect guest for your show.
That would be perfect. Yes, we need to figure out how to get him somehow.
Absolutely.
Yes, that would be absolutely great. Yes.
Okay. Well, Jesse, man, this has been great, and time flew by like nothing. I hope you come back soon. We'll definitely have to come up with something to reconnect, for podcasting, and then you know what, we should also talk a little more often off mic, from time to time. Because
Absolutely, I agree. Yeah, thank you for, I did not do anything big to celebrate the anniversary of Born in the USA. And so I kind of felt guilty when I got your email and I went, damn, why didn't I do something? So I was really happy. I'm like, okay, well, at least I'm being part of the celebration. We're a little disappointed. Us fans really thought we would get a Born in the USA box set this year.
Yeah.
Because he's done Darkness, he's done River, he's done Born to Run. And we didn't get one. We just got basically a re-release of the album with some extra, art.
Like a
So
color
I don't
disc,
know.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I got my pre-order in for that. I'm a sucker.
Yeah, no. I'm too. Hey, I bought the latest best of Springsteen greatest
Oh.
hits that because I'm protecting, I'm supporting the brand, right?
Yep.
As my son, who's a huge wrestling fan, let's just face it, we're marks, Dad.
Yeah.
I said, yep, that's it, we're marks.
Yep, absolutely.
Yes.
Well, hey, ain't no shame in that.
Yes.
Okay. Well, let's call it here. Thanks again, Jesse. Best
Thank
of
you,
luck
Joe.
on Set Lusting Bruce.
Thank you, my friend. Always a joy, and you're welcome anytime to join me.